Welcome, welcome, everybody. The wonderful discomfort of people arriving on Zoom, that first few minutes where we don't know what to say. Do we wait? Do we say nothing? Or do we just ramble like I'm doing right now? I'm Craig McKenzie, part of the Coaching and Mentoring International team, as well as working with our own organization. David Clutterbuck is with me, and Evija Vascenko also. Welcome to you all, and excited to have you with us.
If you go into sitting room.
There you go. Yeah. So if you haven't muted yourself, go right ahead. But this is a meeting, so it's not a webinar. So we plan it to not be one directional, though we will present some things, of course. We do have some interaction planned and hope you'll jump into that with vigor and vim, and we'll enjoy our time together. This is all about executive coaching and mentoring, and our desire and to bring this program that has been running for quite a number of years just into a much more public sphere and a different type of event. Karen, thanks for sharing that. When you get that sorted out, you'll be all right. Well, we're going to put you in breakouts in a little while, so you do have time for that to happen. So thanks for being here. For those of you that didn't make it but signed up, there will be a recording of this, which we're already doing. Those of you that are here, you are being recorded. And of course, if you say something or do something that you wouldn't want others to know about, then please let us know and we can delete that from the recording. That does include you, David, so behave yourself if you want. Right. So yeah, great. We have an hour. Our plan is we're going to share a little bit of some perspectives. We're going to get you to share your own experiences. We're going to try to link that with cases that we've been involved with over the years. We're going to share a framework. We're going to talk a little bit about the program, and then we're going to take questions and answers. So without any further things, David, share your perspective on this sort of momentous occasion for CCMI and Clutterbuck Coaching and Mentoring International.
Thank you, Craig. Well, as Craig has already said, this is a program that we've been running for quite a few years, but which we've completely revamped in the light of what's happened in terms of leadership, in terms of corporate governance, in terms of the whole world of business management since COVID and before. And what we've tried to do is to bring into play the latest research, some of the more challenging areas of managing complexity that underpin every executive's role. I did a survey last year with a series of focus groups with the Conference Board, an American HR organization, and we interviewed groups of HR directors across Europe. And I was astounded by how many of them said that a significant proportion of their executives were effectively obsolete. And that was scary. And basically they gave two primary reasons why their executives were obsolete. One reason was that they simply could not think systemically. They could only think of linear ways. You've got a problem, fix it, and then move on to the next one. They didn't have the time or the intellect or the experience to be able to look behind issues. So they were operating in a manner which was actually holding up development. The second big dimension that the HR directors revealed was that these guys were basically over COVID they'd had to cut a lot of freedom for their direct reports, and post COVID they now wanted to go back to a command and control style of management, when everything that the organization needed revolved around having distributed leadership. But they didn't know how to do either of those things. And the opinion of most of the HR directors that we talked to was that actually these guys need help and the need and it's a big proportion. Some of them are talking about 30% or more of their most senior 200 people being in this condition. They can't fire them all. They need coaches. But we need, but executive coaching in this case is helping them deal with some much more complex personal behavioral issues, confidence in themselves, the fact that a large proportion of them suffer from imposter syndrome. All of these factors are making the role of the executive coach something that's more challenging, but also increasing the scope for being an executive coach. Some of the other things that we've identified as big issues are the loneliness of being a coach, being an executive, feeling a victim of the system rather than an influence of the system. A lot of burnout, increasing levels of burnout among people because of imposter syndrome. The management, large corporations were always political. But in our current revision of our programs, we've included our latest research around the management of politics. How do you help somebody be politically astute and yet remain authentic? It's a really big challenge for them. So all of these factors are coming into account. And I've been talking so far about primarily in terms of coaching, but mentoring too. We're seeing a massive increase in the requirement for executive mentors. And this is because, we believe it's because executives at all levels are struggling to find somebody to have that confidential conversation with, to unburden themselves with, somebody who brings wisdom and experience to help them think through with the quality of their thinking around the challenges that they have. And so we're not going to go into the depth of the differences or similarities between coaching and mentoring, only to say that our current research on coach maturity is very clear that the more mature coaches become, the more of a mentor they become to their clients as well. So all of these things are happening in the background. We see the needs for executives becoming much more complex, much more demanding, and therefore the opportunities for coaches equally becoming much greater. Evija.
Thanks, David. Yeah, Evija.
Yes, hello to everyone. Nice to see you all here today. So many familiar faces from me. Yeah, and when we are talking about executive coaching and mentoring, so very big questions there. So what does it actually mean working with executive? And one important thing here, which I have encountered in many conversations with coaches, with mentors, with HRs, it's very often a question. So whom do we call executive? Whom do we consider to be an executive? And it also impacts how do we answer to this question. And some years ago, when I was having the first conversations with people who were aspiring to be executive coaches, executive mentors, they were saying like people who are leading large corporations. And okay, but what's happening with those executives who are not heading the large corporations, who are at different levels and leading regions, country, companies in country, maybe smaller businesses, entrepreneurs. The work actually is very, very similar as we work with large corporate executives. So what does it mean? It's actually a lot of things which come in there. One thing which I have encountered, actually executives, any level we speak, any type, any kind of executive, they do expect that we have some understanding of environment they are in, they are operating in, they are working in. So that when we work with them, we ask questions or we share some best practices which are relevant to them, not just something very general. Also, it's expectation on some knowledge of business, how the business operates. So how the government functions, how the NGO functions. So again, that it helps us working with them. And also some experience that it's hard sometimes to talk about pure coaching or pure mentoring. And it's actually rare to have very pure coaching because the most often request I have had over all the years of coaching executives, it sounds like something similar to, can you be my sounding board? I want to check my thinking. I need actually a sparring partner. So it combines many things in that. And every executive defines what they are expecting. Craig, David, what's your experience? What does it mean to work with executives?
Yeah, maybe Via, take the slides down just because it's easier to have more of a conversation, and we'll shift for the next question. Yeah, I love the way, you know, Evija, you have such a great wealth of experience, and you know, there's this breadth of typology of executives, and as I work with executive coaches and mentors in training and development, you have a lot of leaders leaving roles that are quite senior that want to get involved as mentors or coaches. They're not sure which, they're not sure how. This is the kind of program that would be suitable for them as well. But then also you have that whole spectrum. You know, when I worked with a large multinational, I was head of building a sort of what I call corporate cradle to the grave program that included mentoring and coaching and leadership development, that whole cycle, with a very large organization. And we had like potential executives, future executives, high potential, first time, you know, we had set up, you know, these different stages and coaching and mentoring as interventions along that cycle. So when you think, hey, I'd like to coach an executive, I often ask my coaches in training and mentors in training, they're like, well, what do you mean by that? You know, and I did a lot of my coach training work in Asia, now much more globally, is people just had this idea that they'd love to coach a CEO. And I would always say to them, well, why would a CEO hire you to coach them? What is it? And it wasn't meant to be an insult. It was much more meant to be like, so what is it that you can bring into this relationship that this person needs? And even if you're young and you've never been in a leadership role, you've never been in global leadership, doesn't mean you can't coach someone who's quite advanced. It just depends, right? Why would they hire you? So what does it mean to work with executives? And the difference that I would say, that just to highlight, and then David, you jump in here, is that very often in coaching, we work with people that can be less functional. Very often we work with leaders and executives that are highly functional. So coaches that are stuck in over-helping, writing reflexes, you know, problem-solving, linear approaches, probably not that useful with someone who's highly functional. Often you don't need to carry on with the conversation. You don't need to do a grow model wrap-up. They don't need a wrap. Once they get an insight, they're gone. I had a leader once, 20 minutes into a session, go, I think I have what I need. And I said, well, so, you know, you want to finish? He's like, yeah. He left. He said, I'm going to use the next 40 minutes to implement what I've just figured out. I didn't even know what he figured out. He didn't even tell me. But I didn't need to know. I didn't have any existential crisis of my value as a coach. It was just like, this is value for this individual. Next session, he shared what he did, how it worked, how, you know, we had a relationship. So functional, but also highly functional sociopaths, highly functional psychopaths, highly functional leaders. There's a whole gamut, but they're high functioning. And that's a big difference, because what's demanded of the coach is very, very different. How would you answer it, David?
I think I'll answer it quite simply in a different direction. I think, you know, if we try and define what is an executive, there's two ways of looking at it. An executive can be defined as a leader of leaders. They can also be defined as somebody, as a leader who achieves results through influence rather than command. And those are two different but very similar ways, or connected ways of looking at what an executive does. So the problems that an executive will bring would tend to be to focus around this use of influence, working through the complexities of the politics of the organization or the structures of the organization. They're less likely to be about how do I develop a particular skill, although that might be there. They might want help on how do I run more effective meetings. And so part of with some of the problem, we might actually sometimes observe them doing these things and give them some feedback. But the primary focus is about how do they get things done without doing them themselves.
Cool. Well, what we'd love to hear from you is we're going to give you a chance to share what challenges executives are facing now from your perspective, your experience. Now, if you get a lot of, I've signed up to lots of, newsletters and stuff, and I'm actually pretty shocked at the content of newsletters related to the content of what executives are telling us their challenges is often very different, right? So, but we'd love to find out from you, what are the challenges executives are facing now in your experience? So we'd love it if it wasn't like what you think they might be, but so much more, what are they facing? So we're going to send you off into breakouts. Evija's going to handle all that. And then you're going to come back in about 5 minutes. And we'd love to just find out, what was the one that you had most agreement on? And then we're going to also ask you, what are the ones that are different? And then you can also put them in the chat. It gives us a little bit of data as a starting point on what you're hearing and what you're experiencing. And if you don't have any experience with executives, then listen and learn, because that's partly why you're here as well. So we're going to post that question in the chat, but head off to breakout rooms. Let's find out. Have a nice conversation, meet some new people or some old friends, and connect. And we'll see you in about 5 minutes. Okay, rooms are opened. Hello, welcome back, everybody. I was sharing how I enjoy the fact that people come back abruptly from Zoom rooms, and it's just much more efficient than live and in person, but it's just really a bit unfriendly. We'd love to hear from you. So what the way we'll do this is just there's a number of breakout rooms, 6 I think, and one of you can share the first one that wants to go. What's the thing that you all agreed with? And then we'll find out what others heard, whether that was sort of similar, and then also have them share something that's different. So over to you, attendees, people, whoever you are, just feel free to share. What was the common challenge that was most agreed upon? Kerry, please go.
If I jump in. Oh no.
With our group, it was.
Oh. Go.
Okay, so Simon, you're number 2. Carrie's going to be number 1. All right. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks. I think with our group, it was managing change comes up a lot because of what's happening in the world economy, and as well as a bit of wanting that safe space that we talked about to check in that what they're doing is the right track, because they don't always get that feedback at that executive level from others.
Lovely. Thanks, Carrie. Okay, Simon, go please.
Our group, we have 5 of us, and we covered different areas. The one thing I think we're all agreeing on is ultimately it came back to the quality of relationships, either the relationships with themselves, relationships with their bosses, their peers. Resources are finite, and there was a big element of helping people with change, which ultimately came down to the quality of relationships.
Beautiful, thank you. Someone else?
Yeah, I can go for group, whatever it was. I think it was 1. So I think we had something around imposter syndrome, especially for newly appointed executives, but also I would say for more senior seasoned ones, but it takes more time to get there with them. and also something around overwhelm / complexity. So the immense complexity they are dealing with, and the sense of, okay, where do I start? And there are so many injunctions and so many competing things in my world. So the need for a safe space to deal with that stuff.
Thanks, Anne. Oh, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, it's
Jeff?
Yeah, we had Tim, who has very efficiently summarized in the chat what our group were talking about. That working with different groups, it is about having those relationships, very much so. And also how they have the conversations with other people, whether that is a coaching relationship, a mentoring relationship, or just having challenging conversations with other people. But I think the overriding thing that came out of our conversation is coaching and mentoring is needed so much. It's a tool that people really need to get familiar with and use on a really regular basis.
Thanks, Claire, and thanks, Tim. His summary is in the chat as well, with some nice detail there. Appreciate that.
But Jeff, coming.
Jeff?
Yeah, in our group, Max and I had similar situations dealing with large multi-companies or multi-billion-dollar companies whose C-suite people were having challenges managing their board of directors. The pressures, coming into the end of the fiscal year, with turnover on the board or with heat coming from the board on a down financial year, what was just that, how do they manage these expectations coming in from their board of directors? And that seemed to be a real common theme with us. And then our third participant, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find her name, but kind of similar thing, was in upper management and not able to really deal with the layering and the complexity of so many people, and her ideas and her knowledge not being heard. So it seemed like just a lot of needed coaching around role clarity and being able to kind of get your voice in there and not being able to make that happen. So that was the other scenario.
Yeah, that's great. That's an interesting one, Jeff, because one of the things that's coming, I've noticed a big increase in coming to supervision of executive coaches in the past 18 months or so, is the proportion of the clients who feel that they are victims of the system.
That's what was described with the third scenario, was that potentially because she was a woman might have been part of that, but also just so many people with the inputs and who's listening, who's not listening, didn't feel like that person. To me, it sounded like her values might not be being into and equal the organization's values. So who knows if that's part of it or not? But yeah.
David, could you expand? That's a very interesting and very powerful phrase, victims of the system. Could you just expand on that a little for us?
Yeah, I think what's happening is that people feel powerless to make things happen. They've got lots of ideas, they've got lots of talents, they can't apply them because they're getting confusing signals from above. And again, it's just described, nobody's listening to them. And what happens is they feel basically boxed in, that they can't. So a big part of the role of the coach now is helping them to fit. Well, how do you break out of this? How do you move from being a victim to an influencer?
If I can add to that, because that was my client, there's also the role of the woman in the workplace, and this woman in particular works in tech. And so she was really battling with her very presence as a woman there. Is that enough? Or should she have impact? And, it was a question of her values, because what driving force for her is to have impact, and not just presence. And so we were just working on, what that means for her, not only how to navigate the extreme politics in the system, but also, when might you say, thank you very much, this is not for me, I can have impact elsewhere.
There's a lovely comment, Francois just popped to me, saying, do they sometimes box themselves? And the answer is yes, we can help them to undo that. Francois is working with me on a project where we are looking at coaches, but particularly executive coaches who are working, who are neurodiverse. And so, but of course, we're also the coaches working with neurodiverse clients. So many executives have a neurodivergent trait or set of traits. And increasingly, we're finding that working with neurodivergence is a critical skill, especially if you're working with clients in finance or the legal professions or wherever. It's no longer an option. If you're going to be working with executives, you will, to any significant level, you will meet up with people who have who are neurodivergent and require a completely different style, where you meet them where they are rather than impose a standard way of working of coaching on them.
Lovely, lovely.
Yeah, if I may add something on that, which is very close to my heart. Most of the executives I'm working with are neurodivergent at some extent, and most of them don't really know it for sure and are very afraid of being so or being seen as such. So it's something which is very much in the shadow, and part of the work I'm doing is to help them put that in light and embrace that part of themselves, because usually they are divided around that, and so it's really integration work.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Yeah, great. Also in the chat from David, you know, linear thinking, feeling evicted in the system, lower adult development. Do we work with this in coaching or mentoring executives? Yeah, I mean, definitely. You know, in my work, we work with vertical development as a key part of it, and helping leaders develop the levels of, first of all, levels of mental complexity, as well as their own ability to skillfully manage themselves, cognitively, emotionally, you know, attentionally, motivationally, all different layers of that, so that they're actually quite skillful. And people are under pressure and at risk. Number of executives, there's one that I'm working with right now in Asia, who used to be able to manage himself more skillfully, but now that he's getting older and there's more pressure, he's finding that he's behaving in ways that aren't helpful. So some of he's maybe reversed or went a little bit lower on his previous development, just because of pressure, stress in life. So all these things are lovely challenges, and it's great that you've talked from experience, because that's really, really key for us all to understand. Evija, you and I both took some time to prepare a little bit on a case that we're experiencing recently. Do you want to just share briefly, and then we'll keep moving?
Yeah, I actually will. But before that, I just want to add on like challenges I'm seeing, because it's lined back from the discussion very strongly. I have had 3 cases during last year working with high achievers, executives who moved up the ladder very fast, who reached the top positions in the corporations. And it's kind of, I want to call it high achiever syndrome, actually. Kind of when people have been achieving success so fast and everything has been working so easy for them, and they have been praised for that. And then at the moment they are losing self-confidence because things are not happening so fast anymore. And the patience is being lost, waiting, like impatience coming in. And it's really an internal battle of regaining back the self-confidence. And this is an interesting thing which I'm seeing, especially with high potential tracks in the companies sometimes. Oh. And a recent case I was thinking about, it's example of a leader who at that time was a regional manager, so managing a couple countries in large multinational. And this leader came with a question. He wanted to move up to go to multi-regional leadership position and he came kind of with two questions. So I want to become better leader, and I want to show my colleagues that I'm making impact. So those are like kind of one, but two challenges in a one he came with.
Thanks, Evija. You know, when I published a post on my LinkedIn yesterday just on bad behavior. So, you know, one of the ways I get hired to coach, you know, is around for people that I would say their behavior has started to become a problem for lots of different reasons. And in this particular case, which we'll share more on this a little bit later when we introduce a framework, but there was behavioral issues. So he was showing up in some ways. So the organization thought he needed coaching. There were political issues within the organization. He was head of, he's the leader globally, essentially, of a particular industry. And he's a thought leader, a recognized historic leader. There were also industry pressures. His industry was completely changing during COVID, pre-COVID, and post-COVID. Stakeholders, available, not available, wanted his behavior changes addressed. He had an ego, but also a brand that was very valuable for the organization. He was faced with a lot of lose-lose situations. He was doing things that he wasn't that good at. And ultimately, one of the challenges that came was he needed to figure out how he was going to dance this next dance of his career. What's he going to do for the next 5 years, 10 years? And strangely enough, you know, he wouldn't really go to the behavioral space, even though he sort of did. And we'll talk about that a bit later. But what worked for him was this: once he had a vision, he behaved better. So there was this sort of, we need to fix this now, or this guy's out the door and our organization is dead, or this guy needs to change. So he changed, but whether he changed sustainably and deeply, not really. You know, the contract ended, so and it wasn't renewed. So that's life. That's an example. Sorry, David. Yeah, jump in, and then Evija, you jump after that.
Yeah, I was just going to go through a couple of examples of things that of assignments that keep coming my way or colleagues. One is the entrepreneur, the founder entrepreneur who wants basically to move out from being in the command and control position and to let the executive team that they've created run the business more fully. Almost invariably, the desire is there, but the ability, they constantly jump back in. And supporting this person, the person in that situation, they need it's both mentoring and coaching here, helping them to think about how they're going to do this, and how do they discipline themselves, and how do they get the team to discipline them in return and give them permission to do this. These I think are core conversations that we have. The other example is the newly appointed HR director. I run a program for the CIPD for aspiring HRDs, where the mentors are existing HRDs and the mentees are aspiring ones. And one of the things that comes out of this is when somebody becomes an HR director for the first time, they frequently walk into the role expecting that they're going to be welcomed with open arms and treated by everybody else on the top team as an equal. Some hopes. HR is almost always treated as the poor relative, you know, and so they have to prove their value. And so the focus of the mentoring becomes entirely around how do you actually work with these people and prove the value that you have, that you do bring, and challenge them in a way that enables you to create real presence and authority on the top team. I think these are very typical issues relating to very typical different situations. And a lot of what we have to do as an executive coach or executive mentor is have the flexibility to move into these different situations, and to help the other person be creative in how they address those.
Thank you. Thank you, David, for sharing great examples. And I want to move forward, actually talking a little bit about the program, because I'm in love with this program for many years already. And I have witnessed actually great value people have gained from this program, both coaches and mentors who just are starting their career and want to make first steps working with executives, as well as those who already are very experienced, because it brings a lot of conversations around very different topics, a lot of practical things, approaches, tools which can be used. I think I have been a participant in this program 5 or 6 times over the years, and I have co-facilitated it also sometimes. So we are going to talk about some concepts, some trends in executive coaching and mentoring. Also, we'll be moving into what you as coaches and mentors need to build as your capability for working with executives. For those who are experienced already, so what are the things you would like to improve? Would like to add maybe to your skill set, or something you need to look at, and just to be sure that this is something you are really doing in a right way and it's the most effective thing you can do. Full module we will be devoting to executive challenges. So everything which executives face, different types of executives at different stages of their development. So how to address those challenges. There will be possibility to supervise your cases, so bring cases for discussion and reflection, and look for some better approaches. We will be talking about some particular executive coaching and mentoring skills which can be used, some frameworks, some tools. We will be also discussing a lot. So what does it mean, the executive coaching and mentoring environment? What's complex and what's simple there? What we need to pay attention to? What we need to dive into? What we maybe need to step away and distance ourselves from? So things you need to really think about. Also, we will be addressing what are the common traps in executive engagements. So things we sometimes don't think about before we enter them, and then we are either very happy that we were able to get away and everything is okay, or something we really struggle with, and it raises a lot of questions for us as coaches and mentors working with those people. Ethics in coaching and mentoring, working with executives. So how to understand politics, what we need to know about this, what we need to help them to understand about this. We will be also talking taboos. So what are the taboos in executive coaching and mentoring? Are there any? I have heard very interesting discussions about taboos. Sometimes those also are like taboos for coach and mentor, because those are things we don't like to talk about our experiences with executives, but they still do exist and they impact how we work. And we would be talking, so how can you grow, improve, change your executive coaching and mentoring practice? So what you need to think about, maybe what do you want to look it like? Maybe you want it completely different than you have it now. So very different topics, areas, so everything which is important for working with executives. And it's going to be very practical theory background coming from David, a lot of practice and experience added from him, from Craig, from myself, and also from experience working with coaches and mentors in supervisions. So everything which we see might be helpful to you. And yeah, David, I wanted to ask you, can you introduce us to one of your frameworks we will be talking about in the program?
There we go. That's better. I'm unmuted now. So this is just a simple tool that came out of research way back in the 1980s when we started asking executives and leaders about the kind of conversations that happened in their teams, and we found that the conversations that added value fell into these 7 different categories. So social conversations, the kind of things around the coffee machine, something that's gone by the board very often with virtual meetings, and which we now strongly recommend that somehow you try and reinstate the social conversation, because it's an important part of the glue of a team. So if all the conversations that an executive is having with the people around them are simply transactional conversations, it's not good for their health. It's not good for the quality of relationships and so forth. Technical conversations, fairly obvious what these are, just getting the data across. Tactical, much more about, well, how do what's the best way of getting things done? And strategic is much more looking to the future. All of these fairly straightforward. Dialogue for self-insight is the kind of conversation that people have that help them to understand themselves better. And you need to have those kinds of conversations before you can have conversations with people about changing their behavior. And then the last one, integrative, it's the kind of conversation we found happened least often within a leader's team, or between a leader and his or her team. And this is much more about, if we could almost say, the meaning of life. How do you, what's the person you want to become? How are you, what is, where do you want your career to take you? How do you want to add value to this organization, etc.? So it's this bigger, broader identity conversation. And by and large, that last conversation, the integrative conversation, typically happened either through a coach or at the instigation of a coach. But it's a model that we can use firstly just for the team lead, for the leader that we're coaching or mentoring, to help them think about what are the conversations they feel most comfortable having with their team, and what are the conversations their team most needs to have with them, and then to look at any gap between those. But it's simply one of many frameworks that help you think about team or conversations the team leader has with their team, with and beyond their team.
Yeah, thanks, David. And we take that further with you as executive coaches and mentors as well, is you also need to develop the ability to create these conversations in partnership with your client, as they need to learn either to develop skill in these areas, or they need to have that dialogue with themselves or with others. And very often the coach is the person who is helping them to develop that skill. You're taking them on that journey. They're able then to take others. And also, I'm thinking about my client that I shared about earlier. That integrative dialogue is where his vision came from. The things he avoided were the behavioral change dialogues along the way. He didn't get insight. He didn't need insight, though it might have been very useful for him. So once things were integrated, then it became tactical, and strategic. How does he now implement his vision? And I had a remit from the organization to challenge him around his behavior. So I had to try to keep that contract rolling and bringing that into the conversation. But again, you as a coach or a mentor, your skill in these areas is really, really important as well. Evija, how does this relate to your case? And then we'll ask everyone another question.
Yeah, it actually does very directly. I'm thinking back about the leader I shared. So the person who wanted to move up from being regional leader to multi-regional leader, and he wanted to increase his influence with his peers on regional level to be able to take this multi-regional leadership role. And actually, we had all those levels of dialogue with him in different sessions. Some of them, not just in one. There was social dialogue about what kind of relationships he needs to build, how he needs to change those relationships, friendships, supports, whom he needs to support and support from whom he needs. So it's about social things. Technical dialogue to understand how the processes work, who makes the decision, tactical dialogue. So here I am, what I need to do, what I need to do in next meeting, in next conversations with my colleagues to increase this influence, and what's important for me to hear from them. So strategic, what's my vision, what I want to achieve, why I want to achieve, and yeah, self-insight. So why I'm doing all this, and of course behavior change. With all this it came. So what kind of behavior I need to change as a leader to show up as a better leader, both to my team and also to my colleagues on higher level. So yeah, everything is there, and not always in the same conversation, in the same session, but over the 1.5 year period we were working together, we had them all.
Yeah, thanks, Via. I mean, and again, this is how we work, right? As a coach, we have to move between those and also move with our clients and also direct them as well in the ways or nudge them in the ways that the contract requires from us. So, this is an example from the program. We won't go further into it. We want to leave a little bit of time for questions, but maybe next slide, Evija, and just some of the program details. Here's the plan, the opportunity for you. This is a program that has approved by the ICF for continuing coach education. It works for continuous professional development for other organizations if you're accredited there. It's not a basic program. It's not a program targeted to teach you how to be a coach or a mentor. It's a program to teach people and help people that want to work more broadly and deeply with executives and leaders, whatever that means for them. So it's about your individual journey to improving your skills in that space. And you may need perspective, experience, expertise, skills, mindset, calibration to different levels of executive coaching. You may need to develop yourself, your wisdom, your maturity, your confidence, your own imposter syndrome. So we address those areas as Evija had reviewed, but also we want to, it's very much about you developing what you need to explore and develop what that is, and then helping you to get there. So we'd love for you, just as before we go to questions, but you can do this at the same time, is we'd love for you just to say, put in the chat if you want, or preface, your own response with it. Where do you think you need to develop to be more skillful in working with executives as a mentor or a coach? And maybe Evija, stop the screen sharing again, please. And so where do you think you need to develop? So what's your learning edge? Throw that in the chat or share it if you want, but we're also happy to take questions about the program. Thanks, David. I won't read them out, you can see them. It's more skillful in finding execs to coach. They're everywhere. So it's just a question, but yeah, anybody have any thoughts on what they want to develop? Carry on with that, please. Or any questions to us about the program or about something we've shared. Just want to give you the last few minutes. Simon will answer maybe the technical ones about the amounts, etc., and all that. But Evija and I don't always know that. We work in different countries.
Simon, do you want to come in on that one?
Or just answer in the chat, Simon, whatever, yeah.
Well, yeah, the simple answer is Coaching Mentoring International is not VAT registered. So the prices are without that.
Yeah, anybody questions, thoughts? Jeff, thanks for that openness, your own imposter syndrome. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, great thoughts.
Can I just jump in here and ask a quick question to
Please.
David? How we integrate mentoring and coaching for the same executive? Is it how we differentiate that, or is there any?
It really is a lot of there's a lot of guff out there that tries to create artificial differences between them, and the reality is they're part of the same spectrum. It's just that as a mentor, you bring particular experience that enables you to craft different questions and to empathize more, and to build that stronger rapport because you've got some shared experience with the other person. You're still operating in a thoroughly non-directive style, but it's just that you're using you're making more open use of your own experience to inform the conversation. You're not giving advice. You may give some context occasionally to help the other. It's all about what helps the other person with the quality of their thinking.
Absolutely, yeah.
Agreed.
I was thinking. Thank you.
And I think that's why we combine these two in the space, right? There is this sense, and I loved it. It really liberated me when David shared this I don't know how many years ago with me. But at the highest level, if you observed a master coach and a master mentor at work in conversation, you might not be able to see any difference.
Tell the difference.
Exactly. But there's differences in the contract, the relationship, all kinds of stuff. But actually the skill of the conversation, holding that space, being with that individual, creating value, there's something magical there. Thanks, David.
That's the empathy piece. I think for me, I think it is mentoring is almost like a shoulder to cry on, or a push in the right direction, whereas coaching is, I use the sporting analogy all the time. It's bringing people to the peak of their performance, and if their performance is lacking in a particular area, it's helping them to improve the performance in that particular area. That's the difference between the two. One of the things that was mentioned earlier, I then put in the training space. I'm not about training people how to hold meetings more effectively. There's all sorts of training programs people can go on for that. If they'd like me to synthesize that and they'd like me to bring that to the table, that's a different, charge them for it. That's a different piece of work. But that's training. I'm not there to train people in skills. I'm there to help support and help them perform.
I actually love the definition of mentoring, which is very simple. Mentoring is coaching plus. So coaching plus knowledge networks, information networks, contact networks. It's
brilliant.
It's kind of merging together everything. And when you talk with executives and ask, so what they really want from you as their learning partner, so what will come up, it's never just ask me a question. It's like very often, can you share some best experiences you have seen in other companies, best practices maybe, so it can improve my thinking? Can you maybe say if you see that I'm going completely off-road here because I have nobody to talk to? Challenge my thinking, not just ask the question. So it's very different. At the same time, it's very, very similar.
Brilliant. Well, great words to end on, Evija. Thank you so much for that. So we'd love to see you on the program if it interests you. We're going to have more conversations. You can join. There'll be some research that we do where there's, this is the beginning of a journey. So thanks everyone for coming. Of course, we'll follow up with information. Thanks, David and Evija, for bringing your expertise and wisdom, and all of you also for contributing so richly and beautifully. So we'll see you soon, somewhere, somehow. Be well.
Have a great day, everybody.